I'm here.
So do you work for the Oxford School District?
I have been employed for the Oxford School District. I am currently on leave at this moment.
Now, I'd like to direct your attention specifically to the fall of 2021. Were you working with Oxford School District at that point?
Yes, I was.
In what role?
I was a counselor in Oxford High School.
Okay. And tell us, please, what general duties are associated with that particular role?
I managed a caseload of about 400 students. With that, I was in charge of scheduling for those students, preparing them for life after high school by helping them kind of look through different potential job opportunities, caring for social emotional wellness for students, and being kind of just a general person who would be consistent throughout their time in high school working with them.
Okay. You said you had a caseload of about 400 students?
Yes.
How many students went to Oxford High School at that particular time?
There were approximately 1,800 students. Divided amongst 4 counselors, there were 1,600, and then approximately 200 in an early college program as well.
So in November of 2021, approximately how long had you been employed with Oxford High School?
I started as an intern in 2014 and was hired full-time in the fall of 2015.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about your background, please.
I came out of college, graduated with a degree in youth ministry, worked as a youth pastor starting in 2009, and then did that and went back to school for a master's degree in counseling. I graduated with that, actually walked in December of 2014 and started working in the high school thereafter.
Okay. Now you mentioned your role included helping students transition into post-secondary either education or employment, scheduling, as well as social, emotional issues.
Yes.
Would one of those roles take precedence?
It would ebb and flow depending on the time of year, but there was never anything that you did that was, this is the most important thing, because it was what student you were with at the time.
Okay.
To a senior going to college, helping them with that college application took precedence in that moment. To a student sitting in front of you with social emotional needs, that took precedence in that moment.
So did you have regular check-ins with students, or was it an as-needed basis?
It depended on what it was for. We did have regular meetings with students in regards to scheduling, but when it came to social emotional, that was more of an as-needed basis.
Did your role as a counselor involve disciplining students?
No.
Okay. Who took care of that?
That would have been the dean or our administrator.
In November of 2021, who was the dean?
Nikki Jack.
All right. And did you work with him a lot?
No, I didn't. He was actually new to the district that year.
Okay. So is there a reason why the counselor would be separate from the discipline of students?
The counselor's role was to be a student advocate, to remain on the side of the student through difficult situations oftentimes, to give the student somebody that they could build that trust and rapport with, where the dean would be enforcing code of conduct.
Okay. What code of conduct? What's that?
The standards that are expected to be followed by students.
Okay, so a rule. Would that be fair?
That would be a part of it,
okay.
Yes. Yes.
Now, in the fall of 2021, was Oxford High School in person, hybrid, or remote?
Oxford High School was in person.
Okay. Were all students and teachers wearing face masks at that point?
Yes, they were.
In the fall of 2021, what sort of issues would you face with the students' social emotional health?
Social emotional health was definitely on our radar in the fall of 2021. Coming out of COVID, coming out of time being out from school, the anxiety that was associated with that time period, we saw a lot of issues for students, whether it be anxiety, whether it be depression, and in a few cases, it was suicide attempts.
Okay. Now, that year, did you encounter any students who actually had attempted suicide?
I did.
How many?
At least 4.
So are you familiar with the term suicidal ideation?
Yes, I am familiar with that term.
Could you please explain to us what that means?
Suicidal ideation
Here, I'm
is...
going to object to relevance.
Judge, I believe this witness will testify that he indicated that the defendant's son was expressing signs of suicidal ideation that was expressed to the defendant.
Well, that was his belief at the time, right? So I'm going to allow it.
Thank you. What's suicidal ideation?
Suicidal ideation is looking at themes, ideas, behaviors which could be associated with suicide. So when you take sadness, depression, anxiety, those on their own aren't necessarily suicidal. And when we look at them, we may see somebody who's not actively suicidal, that may not be expressing a date or a plan or a method, but we see themes that, if left unchecked, could be associated with potentially becoming suicidal.
Okay. Now, as your role as a counselor at Oxford High School, had you dealt with students who were expressing suicidal ideation separate from those who actually attempted suicide?
Yes.
Could you put a number on how many?
Dozens.
Now, you mentioned that there were 4 counselors for a school of around 1,700, 1,800 or so. How was it that each student was assigned to a counselor?
Of the students who are not in the early college program, they were divided out alphabetically amongst their counselors.
Was James Crumbley's son one of the students assigned to your caseload in November of 2021?
Yes.
Is James Crumbley in court today?
Yes, he is.
Could you please point to him and describe something he's wearing today?
He is seated at this table wearing a suit coat with a blue tie.
Your Honor, would the record reflect identification of the defendant?
The record would reflect the in-court identification of the defendant, James Crumbley.
Sir, when is the first time that you would have interacted with James Crumbley's son?
The first time that I likely interacted with him would have been scheduling during his freshman year.
Okay, so for context, November of 2021, he was a sophomore, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, so this would have been August or September of 2020?
No. When students are in 8th grade, they're scheduled at the middle school level.
Okay.
I may or may not have been in his classroom because it's divided out within their 8th grade classrooms. And we don't know the students at all at that point.
Okay.
I would have done scheduling with him during his freshman year, approximately February of 2021.
February of 21?
Yes.
Okay.
Those meetings were done virtually, and were not in depth, and were only to discuss their next year's schedule.
Do you remember anything about that meeting if you
I
had it?
don't remember that meeting in particular, no.
Now I'm going to show you. First of all, if you recall, when is the next time that you had any interaction with the defendant's son?
I don't recall this particular meeting, but I know that there was a phone call in spring of 2021 from a teacher to me, and then I called into the student's classroom to meet with the student.
Okay.
I do not remember that meeting.
All right, I'm going to show you what's been admitted as Exhibit 198. This is an email, May 13, 2021, 1:46 in the afternoon. Without telling us that person's name, who was that person who sent you the email?
Without telling...
Well, who does she work there at Oxford High School?
She was an English teacher at Oxford High School.
Okay. And the email is, "Hi, when you get a chance, can you call the defendant's son down and see how he's doing? He is failing my class and tries to sleep all the time. In class, thanks." That's Exhibit 198, May 13, 2021. You received this email?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And the response from you at 2:07 p.m. is, "I'll catch him before the end of the day." And then her response at 2:08 was, "Thanks, just a little worried." Okay, did you have any interaction with the defendant's son because of this email?
I have, through phone records, I called into a student's classroom and called him down to my office. I don't remember that particular meeting.
Okay. But at least your recollection is that you would have had that meeting.
The evidence from everything suggests that I had that meeting.
Sure, that's fair. Did you contact either James or Jennifer Crumbley then?
I did not.
Okay. And why or why not?
It was a check-in, and it didn't raise to the level of concern where I would contact a parent.
Now, as a counselor with Oxford High School, did you have a sort of method or protocol for when you determined when to contact a parent?
There isn't a set, there isn't always a set level of when you do it, but when something becomes repeated or when something becomes more concerning, I am going to then involve a parent.
Okay. Are grades available to parents on a district-wide basis?
Yes, they are. They are available through a system called Power School, which is available online.
Okay, and that's a system that a parent can log in daily if they would choose to.
As often as they would like.
Now, the next interaction you had with the defendant's son would be September 2021?
I did not actually have an interaction with the defendant's son. I received information about the defendant's son.
Okay, I'm showing you Exhibit 199. This is from a different teacher to September 8th, 2021?
Yes.
Okay. And why don't you go ahead and read the email here that you received.
Hi, Shawn. Could you please touch base with student? In his autobiography poem, he said that he feels terrible and that his family is a mistake. Unusual responses for sure.
Okay, that is September the 8th, 2021. Do you recall any interaction with the defendant's son at that point?
I do not.
Okay. Now, do you recall any meetings, check-ins, or phone calls from September to November of 2008 or 2021?
No. So to give context on this, what I did was have a conversation with the teacher to gain a little more context of what was meant by the email. And then the teacher filled me in that the student was actually joking with others in the class, and that it was not at the level of concern that she had believed when she sent the email.
Okay, so if I'm correct, then you received the email, then you made contact with the teacher who sent you the email?
Yes.
Okay, and then the determination was made that no further involvement was required?
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's... Oh, this is your response. Thanks for the heads up. I'm in senior meetings throughout the day, but we'll try and catch up with him. That was to the same teacher, September 8th, 2021, 9:15?
Yes, that is correct.
This is People's Exhibit 200. This is November the 10th, 2021. The same teacher emailed you, hi Shawn, the defendant's son is having a rough time right now. He might need to speak with you. Do you recall that email?
I do.
Okay. And tell us what you did when you received that email.
I checked in with the student in the hallway in between classes to just let them know that if they were having a hard time, that I was available to talk to.
Okay. And here's your response at 4:44 p.m. I'm sorry, I was in a meeting through the end of the day. I'll catch up with them.
Yes.
So you recall that interaction with the defendant's son?
Yes.
Okay, tell us about that, please.
It was in between classes. I believe the morning after I had responded to this email. And I just spoke to him briefly in passing to let him know that if he needed to talk for any reason, that I would make myself available for him.
Okay. Did you make a decision to contact a parent at that point?
I did not.
Okay. You did not contact a parent?
I did not contact a parent.
And tell us why, please.
Because I wanted to gain any information from the student and allow the student the opportunity to talk. Being sad isn't unusual, but if I had no information other than the student is sad, it's not something I would call a parent over.
Now, when's the next time you had any interaction with the defendant's son?
November 29th.
Right, I'm going to show you what's been admitted as People's 201. This is an email from a teacher to Mr. Ejak and Ms. Fine, and you eventually were CC'd on this email?
I was forwarded this email.
Okay.
Yes.
And the email says, good morning, I had a student during first hour today, the defendant's son, who was on his phone looking at different bullets at the end of first hour today as I was walking around the room passing out their essays. I didn't get a chance to investigate it a bit further since it was the end of the hour. Now that he's on my radar, I'm also noticing some of his previous work that he's completed from earlier in the year leans a bit toward the violent side. I can bring down these things later today during my 5th hour prep if you would like them. And then it was forwarded to you at 9:34 a.m.?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And then your response was, thanks, Jacqueline, I'll be touching base with him as well.
Yes.
Okay, and tell us what happened with this, please.
I ended up going down to Ms. Fine's office, who was on the initial email.
So who's Ms. Fine?
She was our restorative practices coordinator
Okay.
at that time. And she called the student down to her office to chat about the email that had been sent.
Were you present for that meeting?
I was present for that meeting.
Okay, and tell us about that, please.
The student came down towards the end of the second class of the day, and Ms. Fine led the meeting. I was there to be a support for the student in case it became a disciplinary issue, but it was very cordial.
When you say support for the student in case it became a disciplinary issue, that's not for you to discipline, correct?
That is correct. I would be there just as somebody who's able to be a comfort to the student during a time where they may potentially be experiencing discipline.
Now, at that point, was everybody wearing a COVID face mask?
Yes, they were.
And in fact, had you ever interacted with the defendant's son without a COVID face mask?
No, I did not.
So you said Ms. Fine led the meeting? I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Yes, Ms. Fine did lead the meeting. She had a conversation with the student about the email that was received, and led it in a way to see if the student would bring any information available based on what the email was received, where she asked him, were you looking at anything in class? Were you looking at, what teacher were you looking at this information in class, to see if he would acknowledge that it was Ms. Kadena who sent the email. He did. He was compliant during that meeting. And the conversation centered around how it was not school appropriate. The student understood, or at least stated he understood, and was returned to class. A phone call was then placed to the student's mom from Ms. Fine.
Okay, and we heard that last week during the trial. That was from Ms. Fine to Jennifer Crumbley?
That is correct.
Okay, and was that a voicemail that was left?
It was left as a voicemail, yes.
Okay. Did the defendant's son indicate that he received a gun for Christmas a few days before?
No.
So what happened next?
In terms of that meeting,
Yes.
the meeting was over. He returned to class.
How long was the meeting?
5 to 10 minutes.
Now, in the realm of either discipline or your role as a counselor, what does it take to move from a check-in to a phone call home?
It can be subjective. Oftentimes it would be if there's information we feel that is necessary for parents to know. Somewhere it's obvious as if you feel the student may be a threat to himself, or if there's any potential that could be a possibility. If you have concerning information that the student has shared. Or it could just be simply to confirm what a student has said is true.
Okay. So that's a phone call home. What does it take to actually call the parents in for a meeting immediately?
I would have to have a high level of concern that needed parental involvement.
And when was the next time you had any interaction with the defendant's son?
November 30th.
Okay, so that would be Tuesday the next day?
Yes.
All right. So let's talk about the 30th. I'm going to show you People's Exhibit 202. This is an email on Tuesday, November 30th, 2021, 8:05 a.m. From a teacher to you, Ms. Fine. Good morning. I know Jackie emailed you guys yesterday with some concerns about the defendant's son in our first hour class. Today he's watching videos on his phone of a guy gunning down people. It looks like it's a movie scene and not security footage / a real event, but definitely still concerning when taking into account some of his other behaviors. Just wanted to keep you guys updated. Do you recall receiving that email?
I do.
Do you remember when you received it?
It was sent at 8:05. I believe I saw it approximately 20 to 30 minutes later.
Okay. And what was your reaction when you received this email?
My initial reaction was frustration of a student that just had a conversation about school-appropriate behavior. And I wanted to make sure that I met with him.
Okay. So this is Exhibit 203. This is from another teacher to you at 9:32 a.m. Again, Tuesday, November 30th. Here's the photo I took of his paper in case you need it, with a picture of a math assignment. Now, what happened in between the time you saw this email, it was sent at 8:05, to this email sent at 9:32?
So I was on the phone with other parents at the time I received the first email. And when I was done with that phone call, and Mr. Ejak actually was in my office as I was wrapping up the phone call.
Okay.
He had been presented with a picture of the math assignment from the math teacher and wanted to make sure I was involved in that
This picture?
conversation. I don't know exactly what it was. I know he was showing a picture on a cell phone.
Okay.
I would believe it was the initial one, but I do not know that for a fact. I never saw the cell phone.
That's fair.
So he wanted to involve me in a conversation with the student about the math assignment, and I wanted to talk to the student about the email that had been sent that morning. I do not know if he was on that email, Mr. Ejak was on that email about the watching the video or not.
Okay. So we talked about the email from that morning. We're referring to this email regarding
Yes.
the video.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is the information I had at the time that I was making a decision to meet with the student, and Mr. Ejak had the information that there was a math assignment or something on it.
So at the time that you decided to meet with the defendant's son, you hadn't even seen this picture yet?
That is correct.
Okay.
So
Go ahead.
when Mr. Ejak came and mentioned that there was something going on with the student, I made the decision that I was going to go to the math class and retrieve the student. It's less concerning oftentimes for a counselor to walk into a class than a dean because I could be talking about 50 different things with the student.
Okay.
So it just isn't going to raise suspicion for others. So I went to the class and asked the student if he could come with me, and I grabbed the math assignment as part of it.
So you grabbed the math assignment. So I'm just going to admit it as Exhibit 128. Now, this math assignment looks different than the one that was emailed to you. Did you receive an explanation as to why?
I didn't know there was a difference initially because for the first 30 minutes, all I had was the actual physical copy.
And that would be this in Exhibit 128?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So as I was meeting with the student in the office, I had the email about what had been sent about watching videos, and I had the copy that is currently on the screen of the math assignment. So I initially asked the student what was it that you were watching in class? Why am I receiving an email from a teacher one day after I know you just had a conversation about what's appropriate in school and what's not? The student told me he was watching a video game on his phone. Not uncommon, also not school appropriate, especially given the context of what we had just had in the conversation.
Okay.
So we had a conversation about making that good choice and making wise choices. And then I grabbed the math assignment and I put it in between the student and I. So Mr. Ejak was actually in that meeting as well. He sat kind of off to my right. The student was across from me, across from my desk. And I asked him, okay, so we can talk about, making good choices in the classroom, but let's talk about this. And I put the assignment in between us.
And what stood out to you when you saw this?
Well, I wanted him to explain it to me, but some of the things that actually stood out to me the most were what was written on it. Because I read something like, the thoughts won't stop, and I could read help me underneath it being crossed out.
Is this the part right here that I'm highlighting?
Yes.
Okay.
I read harmless act. I saw what looked like one body, and my initial concern was this student's drawing some things that lead me to think he might have hurt himself.
Okay.
So I asked him to explain what's on here, because I didn't want it to just be me interpreting what he wrote. I wanted to hear what he had to say about it. And he told me initially that it was a video game, that he liked drawing video game characters, liked that area of entertainment, and that he wanted to go into video game design. So then I told him, okay, you can tell me that, but let's explain these words. Here you write, the thoughts won't stop. Here you write, harmless act. And here you write, I'd have to look at it, I think it was like, my life is useless or something like that, where he crossed it out
This part that's highlighted right here?
Yeah, and I said, that doesn't sound like a video game to me.
So I take it then you didn't accept his explanation of the video game?
Not in totality, no, because I wanted to gain more context.
So did you make a decision at that point to do something?
Well, as he continued talking, he then started talking about things that were going on in his life.
What do you mean things that are going on?
Well, he mentioned that school's been tough during COVID, that a family member had passed recently. A family dog had died. He said a friend moved away. And as he was talking, I just kept hearing all these themes of sadness.
What was his demeanor like?
Appropriately sad. It matched what he was saying.
Okay.
And so at that point, I told him, okay, this is a lot that you've got going on, and I want to make sure that we get you help. And so I told him, when I hear all of this, what I do is I'm going to call a parent. And I asked him, is there a parent you'd rather I call? He told me mom would probably be easier to get a hold of. So I called mom first and left a voicemail. This would have been approximately 20 to 25 minutes after the meeting started.
Okay.
So at this point, I just decided that it was enough that I wanted to involve a parent.
All right. And you said you called mom first and left a voicemail.
I did.
Did you also call the defendant, James Crumbley?
I did, and it was right after leaving a voicemail. I'm not entirely sure if he answered or not. I think he did, but it was almost like there was just air on the other end.
Okay.
So I wasn't able to leave a message or anything. Mom then called me back a few minutes later, and we talked for, I would guess, 5 or 6 minutes. She was on speakerphone with her son for a brief part of that conversation, and I asked her to please be able to come in, that I had some concerns I wanted to go over. I texted her.
Did you specify those concerns?
Well, I texted her a picture of the math assignment, and by that time I also then received the email that I think you put up earlier of the math assignment.
By this point in time, this was 9:32 a.m. that Ms. Morgan sent it. Was the defendant's son already in your office at that point?
Yes.
Okay. And then did you have a chance to look at this picture as well?
I looked briefly at it, but I was already on the phone with mom at that point.
Okay, this is Exhibit 130. This is what we refer to as the original drawing.
Okay.
And you said you were on the phone with Jennifer Crumbley at that point?
Yeah, so I emailed her then the original drawing as well.
Okay, so you sent this to the student's mother?
Yes.
Okay. And did you have a chance to look at this?
I did look at it. Most of it confirmed what I thought was under the scribble outs, and I also noticed some words were added.
Okay. What words stood out to you?
What do you mean?
When you said words were added, what did you notice?
On the one where he added words, I know he added like OHS rocks, or we're all friends here, which I kind of took as just a 15-year-old writing things. It didn't.
So you're referring to this Exhibit 128, some additional words?
Yes, he added video game this is, OHS rocks. I think I love my life so much.
Okay.
Things that were facetious.
And that was after he was seen with this, is that correct? It was after he created this, Exhibit 130?
Yes, it existed in its form as Exhibit 130 prior to the edits that I had seen on the paper.
Now, at some point, did both James and Jennifer Crumbley come to your office?
Yeah, so I ended up being on the phone with mom for that 5 to 6 minutes. She stated she was going to try and get dad to come to the office, and she was unable to. And so during that point, we had about 20 minutes where I was sort of just waiting. During that time, I showed the student the list of resources I was going to give to his parents.
Tell me about that, please.
It was about a 3-page list of just different mental health services in the area. On it, it gave contact information for them. It gave specialization areas for them. And it gave oftentimes insurance, if it was accepted, if they worked without insurance, anything that they would work with payment plans.
Okay.
So I wanted him to see what I would be providing in his class.
Was the defendant's son with you from the point that you brought him out of class to the point that James and Jennifer Crumbley arrived at school?
Yes.
Okay. And approximately how long was that?
It was approximately an hour and a half. So around, I want to say a little before 10, probably like 9:45, 9:50, I received another call from Mom stating that she was unable to get a hold of Dad and that she would be coming in.
Okay. Now, if I told you that we saw surveillance video that indicated you welcomed them, both James and Jennifer, in your office at 10:40 a.m., does that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay. Now, what was your expectations of what was to happen at the end of that meeting?
My hope was that they were going to take him and either take him to get help or even just to take him to let's have a good day. Let's have a day where we just spend time with you, where we are with you.
To take him out of school?
Yeah.
Did you believe that he could be left alone at that point?
I didn't want him left alone. I didn't want to make that decision that he was okay to be left alone. So that's why I stayed with him for as long as I did, until I had parents there.
Did you express to the student or his parents that you identified suicidal ideation?
Yes, I said that the student, when I asked the student if he had a plan, if he was a threat to himself or others, the student said, his words were something to the effect of, I can see why this looks bad, I'm not going to do anything. So I had all this information, but the student was saying he wasn't going to be doing anything. So when the parents came in, I went over all of the things I had seen over my time with the student. That he expressed the sadness over a dog passing. He expressed that COVID has been hard, that a family member passed, that a friend left. He expressed an argument the night before with parents.
Did he tell you details about the argument?
No.
Did he tell you that he received a gun a few days ago?
No.
Tell us about the meeting when James and Jennifer arrived.
It was initially odd to me that they were both there because I wasn't expecting that. But not to the point where I asked anything about it, just it was unexpected. Both parents followed me back to my office. The student, that was the one time he was in there by himself, was when I went out to greet the parents and brought them back. The student and his dad sat across from me, and Mom sat in a chair kind of diagonal from me. And Mr. Ejak had left once we had confirmed parents were coming, and he returned for that portion of the meeting. So really, I felt like parents were confirming what I had said without giving additional information.
Well, hang on, let me ask you about that. You say confirming without giving additional information. I want to make sure I understand what you mean by that. So first of all, you've had these kind of meetings with parents in the past?
I have.
Okay. When you say confirming, is that something that would typically happen in these meetings?
It could, but oftentimes you may gain additional information. As you know, as a school employee, I had 90 minutes.
Okay.
He's 15 years old.
So did James or Jennifer give you any additional information?
No.
Okay. So tell me what you did and what was said.
So to start off the meeting, I asked Mom if she had received the phone call from the previous day, and that those events were true. She said yes. I talked about how the student had expressed these different areas of sadness, that his dog had passed, yes. Family member had passed, yeah. Friends left. And all of those were just confirmed.
Were there any details about the circumstances of the friend leaving and the impact on their son?
I didn't know any details about it. No.
They didn't share any with you?
No.
Okay. I'm sorry. I interrupted again. Go ahead.
It's okay. So a lot of it was, I felt like I was bringing information and they knew it, but I wasn't gaining information. So at that point, I know I handed Mom the list of resources and said I'd like him to get support outside of here. I'd like him to get help and have somebody that he can talk to. And Mom made mention that they would, but they couldn't right away. So I told Mom that I wanted him to get help as soon as possible, today if possible, and was told that wasn't possible.
Okay, told by James, Jennifer, or both?
By Jennifer.
Okay.
James, at that time, to my memory, was talking with his son.
Do you recall what he said?
I remember it, yes. He was looking at the math assignment with his son.
When you say math assignment, are we talking about
It's
this one?
the hard copy.
So we're referring to this, Exhibit 128?
Yes.
Okay.
And he was talking to his son and mentioned that, you have people you can talk to. You can talk to your counselor. You have your journal. We talk. And it felt appropriate at that time, but...
At that point, did he share any details about anything you had discussed?
I don't recall any additional details, no. But my concern at that point was that there wasn't any action happening.
When his wife said that they can't, did he protest that?
No.
So you said you had a concern that no action was happening, so what did you decide to do?
Well, I told them that with getting help, I said I wanted to see movement on within 48 hours, and then I'd be following up.
Okay. So if the shooting didn't occur, what was your plan?
I was going to meet with the student the next morning and see if they had had conversations about it, if they had made some plans to move towards some sort of therapy.
And if that didn't occur, what were you going to do?
I was going to call Child Protective Services.
Now, generally speaking, within Oxford High School, is it preferred to send the student home when an issue arises, or keep the student at school?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean with that.
So you didn't call the police?
As a counselor, I can't send a student home anyway.
But you didn't want him to be alone?
I didn't want him to be alone. So in this context, my thought was when parents were saying they had to return to work, I wanted to make sure the student was with people. Because my concern was him, was his well-being and his ability to be safe and cared for.
Did James Crumbley elaborate at all on the fight they had the night before?
No.
Now, how long did tell us how the meeting ended.
Jennifer asked if they were done, which felt abrupt. And during that time, the student had also expressed interest. He wanted to go back to class. I asked Mr. Ejak if there was any, from a discipline standpoint, is there anything you need to do? Is there any reason he can't go to class? And I was told no. So I wrote him a pass to return to his end of his third hour.
Okay. When Jennifer asked, are we done here, did James protest at all?
No.
So tell us what happened as you wrote the student the pass.
I told the student that I cared about him and wanted him to know that I just wanted him to know that.
Did either James or Jennifer say that to him?
No.
Mr. Hopkins, do you have any knowledge of firearms?
Very limited.
Would you know what this firearm depicts? What kind of firearm?
A handgun.
Is that the extent of your knowledge?
Yeah.
What about this bullet here?
A bullet.
Just a bullet? And neither James nor Jennifer said anything about the firearm or the bullet?
No.
Now, you indicated that you passed on a 3-page list of resources for mental health providers.
I did.
Okay. I'm going to show you a screenshot of 137 here. In James's hand, does this appear to be that list of resources?
Objection. I would say that calls for speculation. I don't think Mr. Hopkins knows what's in Mr. Crumbley's hand.
Do you know what's in his hand?
I know that it's multiple pages of paper, and I handed in a stapled 3-page piece of paper.
Okay. Do you see anything in Jennifer Crumbley's hands?
I do not. Or a phone. And something in her right hand, but I'm not sure. Maybe. I see a phone.
Now, in years as a high school counselor, how many times have you had to call a parent in and tell either mom or dad or guardian that you identified suicidal ideation in their child?
15 to 20, over a dozen.
Okay. Any of those meetings, did a parent fail to take their child home?
I can't think of any, no.
Now, you indicated this was a confirming responses from James and Jennifer Crumbley. In those other meetings, were parents sharing information?
Oftentimes, yes. Oftentimes, parents would come in and want to paint a more complete picture of their student, of their situation. Oftentimes, all the time, I feel parents know their kids better than I do. I have, if all I ever did was meet with students, I might have 2 hours a year with each student.
Do you rely upon the parent for that information?
Absolutely.